I think we need new leaders, and religion needs to be fixed. Basically, the average person knows something's wrong. So that's why we have the criticism of the religion. Religion is a divisive thing. It's dividing America. First of all, it's run by money, and it pretends not to. So it's affecting the sermons. It's affecting what people teach. It's affecting what they do.
With shootings in schools and universities across America and terrorism, you may wonder what's wrong with the world today. If we're having a moral crisis, what part does religion play? Is religion to blame, or can religion fix the world's problems? Is it the problem or the solution? First up, Jeff Schweitzer, author of Beyond Cosmic Dice. And also Steve Gray, who is senior pastor of the World Revival Church in Kansas. It's great to have you both here today.
Yeah.
Kansas City.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Steve, is religion the problem or the solution these days?
Well, I think it's part of the problem. I think religion in its present condition is not going to be able to solve the world's problems. I think the average person knows that religion is broken and it needs to be fixed. And the only people that don't know it are probably the ones that are leading the charge. And so I think we need new leaders, and religion needs to be fixed. Basically, the average person knows something's wrong. So that's why we have the criticism of the religion. Religion is a divisive thing. It's dividing America. And it can be fixed, but it's going to have to be fixed before it can fix anything else. And that's the problem I think we have.
So what in particular are some of the problems when you say it's broken?
Well, there's so many things. First of all, it's run by money, and it pretends not to. I mean, everything. It's just like, you kind of expect the television industry. We kind of know it's run by money. We don't know that the church is run by money. So it's affecting, and numbers and money. So it's affecting the sermons. It's affecting what people teach. It's affecting what they do. And then we all pretend that it's not about that. So if it's going to be about that, we probably ought to be honest about it and say that's why we do what we do, as opposed to pretending not to. So a lot of hypocrisy is full of it, a lot of government problems with it. And then most of all, what I like to say is, you go to church and you don't get anything. You don't really meet God. You meet religion, programs, maybe some friends, some socialization and things like that. Are you going to meet God? Are you going to have, is Jeff going to have, am I going to have an encounter with God if I show up at that church? And it doesn't matter what kind, the answer is no. So we're all doing our own kind of thing, but that doesn't mean because we do our own thing, you're going to meet God, have an encounter with God, or say God's real. You're not, basically nothing's going to happen.
You know, when you were saying what was happening in church, I was thinking I was in Westwood the other day and driving down the street, and I saw a church on the corner, and the sign out front, it said the sermon was going to be something like, on people who fall asleep in church, or people who sleep in church. So is that what people are doing today in church? They're sleeping in church?
Yeah, and there's so many symptoms of the church off. For instance,
not in Steve's ministry.
Yeah, no, that's probably true, but there's so much goofiness going on, like a drive-through church, where you go through like a McDonald's or Burger King, you drive through and you get a little sermonette and a little inspiration, and those things are real. They're popping up in America. And, the average person says, that's ridiculous. They know it's wrong. And there's another church service, all they do is sing U2 songs. That's it. And it's called a U2charist. Now, is that silly or what? And they have communion and that, and they sing U2 songs. So see, those are symptoms.
If they're paying royalties.
They are. They are. They have to. And that's the symptoms that something's wrong. And the fixing of it is to get away from making morality the calling card first, because that's dividing. And that's when you think of church, you think, I'm going to go get a moral lesson, right? And
don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah, and then when you go and you look at it, those says, but they're not doing any better than I am at this, but they're telling me to do better. And so we're starting at the wrong point. The calling card in America is morality, and the calling card is supposed to be the presence of God. You'll meet the presence of God. You'll meet God, you'll feel, you'll know, you'll hear, because we say God talks, but not very many people listen. And if you did say you heard God, they probably think you were crazy. So, the religious system itself is stuck on itself, and it's not wanting to budge. And so I'm trying to come along and point out the absurdities. That's why I wrote the book, My Absurd Religion.
I was just going to say, I should say his book is My Absurd Religion.
But it's also By Which I Make My Living, which says I'm not bailing out, but I'm trying to expose what's going wrong. And I'd say this in the book: the religion that was supposed to save me almost killed me. I mean, literally. I mean, it just about ruined my life. It ruined everything. And I was a pastor for 12 years and found myself at the bottom, just a wreck. And did you know we have 1,500 pastors resign every month?
1,500?
1,500 every month for various reasons, but But
is this across all denominations, or?
yeah, pretty much.
I see.
Just, yeah, there's
In
not
America.
one particular. Yeah, in America.
Okay.
What does that say? And so the system we have now looks like it's working. It also looks like we're growing. But did you know the church hasn't really grown numbers with, you put the who died and who was born together, since the 60s. We haven't, it's church shift. Everybody's just running after the best program. And so we're trying to tell people in our church and others, you can have an encounter with God. Everybody deserves a chance at the presence of God. Then after you have a God encounter and you have the presence of God, then you tackle morality and and ethics like that. Because morality without the presence of God is absurd. That's what I say.
Jeff, is religion the problem or the solution these days?
Religion has failed humanity. I think it's a big part of the problem. And to me, trying to fix religion is like trying to fix the engine in the Titanic. I think it's just trying to tackle the wrong problem in face of a much bigger issue. Religion has...
The boat will go faster underwater?
Exactly. Religion has failed to provide humankind with a path to a sustainable future. Religion has failed to give us a morality that doesn't condone war and aggression under the name of God. Religion promotes policies that contribute to human suffering, poverty, and disease. And I think religion's had 2,000 years to prove itself as a worthy guide to moral behavior, and I think it's failed. And I don't think we can wait 2,000 more years to see if it's going to work or not. Many of the things that we view as moral behavior on which much religion is based is really evolutionary characteristics that are a result of our sociality. We're weak creatures in nature. We can't take down a lion individually, but we can take down a lion in a group. And so group behavior, group cohesion is very important to our survival. And so what we have is kindness, reciprocity, honesty. Those characteristics that we view as moral are actually biological traits that result from our evolutionary history and sociality. I think we need to go back to those core traits, go back to who we are as biological creatures, and rediscover our true morality, which is absent from religion.
On biology
exactly.
and not religion. Interestingly, you didn't mention money. He says the church is all about money, but that's one criticism you didn't make.
I mean, I agree with many of Steve's characteristics of what the problem of religion is, but I think he is trying to reform it from within, and I am trying to say that religion is fundamentally flawed. And that's why we take very divergent paths on how to fix the existing problems.
Well, Steve, you say that having an encounter with God will make the difference or change. Can you tell me what you mean by that, or how that's...
Yeah, and that's a valid question, because it happened to me. I'd been in the ministry about 20 years, and I'd had a church for 12 years, and I did everything right, I thought, and ran a church the way it was supposed to be run. But I had never really had any experience that I read about in the Bible. And I saw people in the Bible hearing God, expressing, and my favorite one, of course, is the guy called Saul who became Paul. And what was he? He was a pretty messed up guy. He's going to persecute Christians in prison and really approve of their death. And he's got papers to go do that. And he's walking along this road, and suddenly a light flashes, and God's come down to him. And he experienced it, and guess what? He got up a different person. And that's what religion needs to do. It needs to make us different people, and it doesn't in its present condition, and it won't. It's not geared to do that. It doesn't even, our present leaders don't even believe that can happen today. So I didn't believe it could happen today. So I'm thinking about resigning, I'm thinking about moving, I'll go back to teaching. I never gave the option God would do something. And he did, and it happened right in front of my whole church. I walked in on a Sunday night, where I did for 12 years, and I took about 8 steps in the service, and I mean, just like that, kabam! It was like an electrocution from heaven, and everybody's looking at me, and I became a different person, just like walking on that road, like Paul on that road. I became a different person in front of my wife. I mean, she saw me change right before her very eyes, and all I did was have, that's what I mean, the presence and encounter of God. And so,
is that what led you to found your church, or had you already found it?
No, we'd already found it. That was, and that's the funny part about it, because I used to say, like everybody else today, God's in the house and God's here, and we know you can't feel or know anything, but just believe by faith He's here anyway. And I didn't realize I was saying He was there when I'm not sure He was.
Do you think that's common? A lot of people standing up there in the front of the room may not really, they're saying the words and not really sure if He's in the house? Or?
Almost, yeah, absolutely. Very rare if they are experiencing God themselves, and so they only give what they can. And so this happened to me, and I became a different person, and my preaching changed, my church changed, my attitude changed, and of course I saw that a lot what I was doing and what everybody was doing, there's a lot of absurdities in it, and I've been trying to correct that ever since.
We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Elijah, author of The Underground Bible. Welcome back again today, Elijah.
Thank you.
And I should say, okay, we're pairing you and Jeff up again today.
Okay.
So Elijah, is religion the problem or the solution these days?
Well, religion is the problem. And unfortunately, Jeff had the misfortune of growing up a scientist and then becoming a philosopher. I grew up a scientist and became a student of the Bible. And I wasn't interested in religion. I went a totally different route than Steve, the pastor. My quest from the beginning was simply to find out truth, because all I found was people were liars. And Jeff gives you
So even in the church?
Oh, everywhere, especially in the church, because as I got into the New Testament, being raised a Jew, I was interested in learning what this book was talking about. It was very confusing, very cryptic in nature. And
We agree on that.
And my problem was, how do I understand this thing unless somebody teaches me? So I started searching the continent for teachers, and I never found one. I wound up teaching people I was searching while I was searching. And the reality was, it took many decades to unravel what I call in the book the language of angels. Paul the Apostle refers to this language of angels. The word angel simply means messenger, and in the book of Hebrews it teaches you these messengers called angels are human beings. They're not feathery creatures, light doesn't come out of their heads. So theoretically, Steve and myself are angels.
So people here on earth?
People, human beings, you know, bones and flesh, we bleed, and we're simply somehow picked out by God.
Might be me the devil, by the way, but that's all right.
He's going to do it to me again. And we're picked out by God, and we're fed this in understanding so we can help other human beings with it. The problem with religion and why it's the problem is nobody's going back to the original mess caused 1,000 years ago by the Roman Catholic Church. It's called the Roman Crusader Wars. They marched out, they genocided the original church that Jesus began, replaced it with their own look-alike, and it's still operating to this day. Now, as the Protestants come up in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, they're protesting against this Roman false doctrine being taught. And as Protestant leaders get into centuries of work, they have nothing to lean on, so they start absorbing the teachings of the Roman Church, and it seeps into Protestantism, and the whole church, like Steve said, is a mess.
So blame it on the Catholics.
Right. And now no, you're really blaming it on the Jews, because the Roman Catholic leaders are the Jewish Pharisees of Jesus' time, who would not agree with him. And they want to keep that ancient Judaism of their Roman descent when it was perverted, which is all Jesus was doing. He was trying to reconvert Judaism back to its original form. Rome was in control of Israel in the time of Jesus, quite a long time, and it had perverted it. He was trying to put it back on track. That's what the word reformation means, to reform it. He wasn't trying to start something new. It's the Romans come along again in the 1000th century, 1,000 years ago, 10th century, and they re-pervert it by getting rid of the original leaders and people who knew and reinstituting a whole book of lies. I've spent 5 decades unraveling those lies. I've got them all listed. That's what that book is about.
Here, huh?
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's only touching on it. I've got papers written about that high on this thing. If anybody ever gets around to reading them, I'll probably get the Nobel Prize, but I don't need it. I put that out for the people to see. It's not religion. It's the falsification of what people or churches are presenting as what was supposed to be the true religion. And it's totally different. That's what Steve stands on. He's one of these, not rogues, but one of these people who sat back and had an experience of, wait a minute, what's in that Bible and what's in those churches are not synchronized. And That's the problem.
Have you had your religious moment, Jeff?
The problem,
Jeff, I'm sure, will never have a religious moment.
the problem with that thesis that Elijah just proposed is that it implies that religion at one point was sound and then it was later perverted. But if you go back to the document on which religion is founded, the Old Testament and then the New Testament, it's perverted from the beginning, and it's based on this premise that there is an invisible man in the sky with magical powers. And if you look at what was in the Old Testament, you find very perverse sense of human behavior. In Exodus, we're told a man can sell his daughter into slavery if he needs a little more money, that children who curse their parents should die. In Deuteronomy, we're told that homosexuals should be stoned to death. In Leviticus, we're told that, I'm sorry, that's Leviticus. And Leviticus also has tons of passages about sacrificing bull, goats, and rams to atone for sins, to appease a wrathful and hateful God. And it's not just contained in the Old Testament. If you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, there are plenty of odd passages. In Matthew, we're told that Jesus did not come here in peace. He did not come here to send peace. He came with a sword. We're told that, talk about family values. We're told that it's okay in the name of religion for a family to be rendered apart with father killing children and children killing parents, because we're told in the Bible that you're not worthy unless you love Jesus more than you love your parents and more than parents love your children. It's not exactly family values.
Elijah, how do you respond to the passages in the Bible?
This is what I said at the beginning. A scientist like Jeff, who comes into a philosophy like religion and is half-baked because he only has 15 of the sentences out of 400,000.
Okay, so those harsher passages, you're saying that in the context, the overall context,
yes,
that they...
He takes a passage from the New Testament and says, Jesus says, hate your mother and father, or you're not worthy of me. He says, Jesus says, rip out your right eye if it offends you. What he doesn't get is the essence of the sarcasm that Jews contain. You have control of your entire body. There is nothing your body's ever going to do that you don't have control of. And therefore, don't give me the malarkey, your eye is offending you. If so, rip it out. That's what he's really getting at. Guys like him take it and they twist it to fit their own ideals. They want to rip it down. No, it has a powerful message to the stupidity of human beings who want to blame the devil, blame their spouse, blame their country, when it's them causing the problems because they refuse to get rid of their drug habits, their immoral habits, their unethical habits. They don't want to control themselves. They want to force it on everybody else. Society did this to me. No. In the Bible, it's telling us, no, you have absolute control. Exercise it like I did and proved it. It didn't take me patches to get rid of smoking at 21. It took a simple decision. I don't want to do it anymore. And it was over. And it's the same thing with every illegitimate or sinful thing, which is some unethical or immoral behavior. A terrorist is not born in a capsule. He is trained from childhood through a book that's so horrible that teaches the Islamic people murdered the Westerner, murdered the Christian, murdered the Jew. And if you don't murder them, at least tax them. Hello? This is not talking about the peace that Jews want. There's a whole different structure under here. We're developing, from the day we're born, we're developing self. We're not born with a self. The minute we're born, we're taught by the nurse, shoving a bottle in our face, or mama doesn't want to give us the breast, going away from nature, and on and on and on. By the time we're 10 years old, we're so confused we don't know which way is up or down. That's what Jeff's problem is. Although he became a scientist, he never found right from wrong or up or down. So what he was referring to in the Old Testament is the rules that were written well after man turned bad. It was once good, to show him how to get back. Look at this mirror and see what sin is.
Well, so he's saying that you don't believe in right or wrong or have a sense of right or wrong? Do you agree with that?
Well, no, of course not. But before I even get to that, absurdity, he doesn't like my interpretation of the words in the Bible.
You're right, because the Bible says you cannot interpret it properly.
On and on and on. You're going to let me talk
I'm getting
now.
even for last time. You took my 20 minutes of the last show. Okay.
Elijah doesn't like my interpretation of the Bible, but that's the very point, that it's open to interpretation. And in fact, my interpretation is equally valid. Let me just read it from Matthew 21. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And a man's foe shall be they of his own household. Yeah, there are multiple ways to interpret it. I interpret it one way, he might interpret it another. The fact is that these were the original words of the Bible. And there's no way that you can arbitrate between different interpretations of those words. He might think that I'm construing him in a way that's not fair, but I also have that view about his interpretation.
I'm sorry, we're going to need to take a break, but I wondered, I mean, do you agree with his claim? I mean, are you saying that there is a biological basis, let's say, for right and wrong, if you want to
Very
base it
much
on
so.
science,
I think we are inherently moral creatures and have an inherent sense of right and wrong, and we've lost that by being taught a false morality through religion.
I agree with that.
We'll be right back. All right, and we are back today discussing morality and religion. Elijah, I know that you didn't want to quite let Jeff have the last word there before the break. You had a comment about his...
Only because what he just quoted, and it shows you how people misquote the Bible. He quoted a prophecy. A prophecy in the Bible is basically God telling the human race what to expect in the future. He is not telling us this is what he wants human beings to do. He's just telling us, beware, this is coming down the pike in the future. Now, see, when a guy like Jeff takes a piece out of the Bible and he bends it to his own meaning, it turns it into a lie. And this is not correct. Peter, the apostle, teaches us in the Bible, no one is allowed to interpret the Bible personally. It must be interpreted through itself. And this is how I've trained people in the language of angels. I can show them in the Bible where the Bible actually translates itself in different places. As you take thousands of pieces that are translating, it's like learning a new language, like a foreign language.
Steve, since you're coming from a religious perspective, what do you think of Elijah's approach?
Well, I think he's right on the interpretation that was a prophecy. And you can't just take everything literal. Some things in the Bible are literal, but some are veiled. And some have mystical meanings. And so you have to know the difference, and I think you have to study the culture and put it back in its original context first.
And also for reforming the church.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, when Jeff's sitting here, I like Jeff. I have to like Jeff. And I have to like you because I realize everybody's a symptom of this problem. And I'm a symptom of it. But the bottom line is I think everybody wants to know God. But they come away as a symptom. Maybe Jeff would say there is no God now. But if he could find him, I think he'd like to. But so I find society is they're not anti-God. They're anti-religion. And my religion is treating them like they're anti-God.
Is that the sort of thing when people say they're not religious, but they're spiritual? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
what-
That
they're
they're kind of saying that they...
And so,
I feel the same way.
So, you know, churches and religion treat people like they're anti-God, rather than, they just don't want all this junk. And they want reality, and they want transparency, and they want real people to express real things to them and let all the other stuff go. And help me connect with God. If I can connect with God, then a lot of the other is going to go right for me. And the way you read the Bible is going to go right for you too. It's going to change. But they're not getting that. And so we got to stop all the silliness, all the absurdities, and get down to what a church is for. And it's not for humanitarian aid. It's for people to connect with God. Then, if they want to be humanitarian or help the poor or whatever, that has to be afterwards. So the church, and political. I don't mind churches becoming political, but they need to get their own house in order first. I need to go to a church and not hear a political message. I need to connect with God. After I do that, maybe we'll talk politics.
Well, Elijah, since I asked Steve what he thought of you, what do you think of Steve or his philosophy or approach?
Well, first let me comment to his recent subject matter. This is what I said in the last segment. What is unknown to people concerning religion or Christianity as a religion is that there has been a purposeful act committed on humanity by the Roman Church. And the purposeful act was to destroy what was developed by the church Jesus started. The church Jesus started had nothing to do with business, sales, salaries, money exchange, and that was all changed to bring business back into focus, taxes, and so on, by Rome. This essence, over a 1,000-year period, has been focused on destroying a person like Jeff from ever getting close to having an experience with God. People like Steve and I have fallen through the cracks somehow during life. Most people are in Jeff's corner. And when they come to church, they come armed like Jeff. Now, when a person like Jeff...
So even the people who come to church.
Oh, yes. And when a person like Jeff comes to an experience with God, sometimes like with Paul, the apostle, God will reach out and touch a guy like that. They become greater evangelists than people like us, who are just going through the paces for year after year.
Well, Elijah, I think you get the last word today. Thank you again for being here, and also Steve Gray. Steve's book is My Absurd Religion, By Which I Make a Living, and Elijah's book is The Underground Bible, unveiling historical fact and deciphering religious myths. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.